Great. Welcome, everyone. This is the ArchivesSpace training on agents, subjects, and classifications. I'm Rachel Searcy, and I'm the accessioning archivist at New York University. I'm here with my co-trainer, Brittany, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brittany Newberry. I am the Music and Pop Culture Archivist at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia.
Great. So while I share some housekeeping information, we'd love to get a better sense of who is here with us today. So if you can, please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and for fun, or perhaps not, what the weather is like where you are. In advance of this training, you received an email with an agenda and links to all of the materials you will need to participate in this workshop and to continue learning after the training is over. At the top of the agenda, you'll see a link called Course Materials, which includes the Quick Start Guide for the course, which has links and resources for the topics that we're covering today. We may not stick exactly to the agenda, but we will take the planned breaks. We are using Zoom webinar for this training, and your microphone and camera are both muted. If you'd like to ask questions, we ask that you use the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. Putting your questions in the Q&A helps us make sure that we don't miss your questions, as sometimes things that are said in the chat can get lost in the shuffle. But if you have a general question or need some form of assistance, please feel free to reach out in the chat. Some of the questions will be read and answered during the allocated Q&A time, but we might also answer some questions by typing directly in the Q&A. So please be sure to refer to that section because there may be some additional information for you there. We are using the latest version of ArchivesSpace for this training, which is version 4.1.1. If you're using an earlier version of ArchivesSpace at your institution, just keep in mind that some of the features you see today may not be available to you at home. We won't be able to troubleshoot issues with you about your own implementation of ArchivesSpace at your organization, but if you're having any issues on that front, please feel free to email us at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org. Finally, please keep in mind that there are many participants in this workshop from a variety of institutions with varied experience levels. Remember that the ArchivesSpace Code of Conduct applies to all ArchivesSpace events, including this one. So please be considerate and respectful in your interactions with your fellow participants, Brittany and myself in the Q&A and the chat. This training is going to provide an overview of 3 record types in ArchivesSpace: agents, subjects, and classifications. I want to mention that the examples we are using today are real collections held by ArchivesSpace member organizations. These organizations have made their metadata available to the program for the purposes of education and training. And so we're very grateful for that. Before we get into the training proper, I just would like to introduce myself a little more fully. Like I said before, I'm Rachel Searcy. I use she, her pronouns, and I've been involved in ArchivesSpace for about 9 years now. At NYU, I worked on our migration to ArchivesSpace from Archivist Toolkit, and I also act as our primary administrator. I've served on the ArchivesSpace Advisory Council and am the immediate past chair of the Technical Advisory Council. I've been working in academic archives for the past 13 or so years, so many of my references and examples are going to be informed by that perspective. But if I say something that doesn't match your process, please feel free to ask for clarity. We all know that there are many processes, workflows, and use cases in ArchivesSpace, and that's true in ArchivesSpace as well. So with all of that out of the way, we are going to get started, and we're going to start with agent records. Before I start sharing my screen and before we jump into what agent records look in ArchivesSpace, I would just like to set the scene by doing a little bit of an authorities overview. So according to DACS, DACS stands for Describing Archives a Content Standard. An archival authority record identifies and describes a person, family, or corporate body who is associated with a grouping of archival materials. It documents the relationships between records creators, the records created by them, and/or other resources about them. And it may also control the creation and use of access points and archival description. So ArchivesSpace can help support the management of authority records, specifically in the form of agent and subject records, in relation to one or more accession record, resource component, digital object record, or digital object component record. So now I'm going to start sharing my screen. And I'm just going to readjust my windows here. I won't have the chat open, so Brittany, please interrupt me at any point if that's necessary. So in general, there are 3 ways that you can use agents or subjects or the authorities modules to provide description about accessions, archival resources, and digital objects. And I will demonstrate each of these ways a little more later. The first way is to link to a pre-existing agent or subject record that is already in your ArchivesSpace instance. So if that record already is in your database, it can be linked to a new or existing accession, resource, digital object, or component record. And individual agent records can be linked to 0, 1, or many records. And the editing screens, when you're in one of those resource description records, will provide a linking option. And in the case of agent records, you are required to specify the role in which the authority record is being linked. We will go over all of this. You can also establish a new record. So if that name does not already exist in your database, it can be created and then linked to the resource record or the accession record that you want to. You can create a new record in a few different ways, and one of them is by using this create menu and then selecting agent and then selecting the type of agent you want to create. In addition to those methods, you can also import an external authority. You can do that through a plugin that Brittany will demonstrate a little bit later, which allows you to import authorities maintained by the Library of Congress name authority file, as well as the Library of Congress subject headings. And you can also import data via EAD and MARC files, and I will show that as well. So now that I've given kind of a very broad overview, let's get into agent records themselves. Agent records identify persons, families, or corporate entities that have a specified relationship to archival materials or to an activity, such as an event or an assessment that involves archival materials. The agent record can also be used for managing relationships among names. Agents are their own record type, and they are established and controlled separately from material descriptions in ArchivesSpace. So just to clarify, they are records unto themselves, and then they are associated with collections or parts of collections through linking. As I mentioned before, agent records can be associated with accessions, resources, resource components, digital objects, and digital object components. And they can be linked through 3 primary relational modes. So I am going to bring up a resource record to show you what I mean by all of that. We are going to be looking at this resource record for the Krispy Kreme Corporation records, which already has quite a bit of data here. So I'm going to move down to the agent links section of the record. I'm just going to make it a little bit larger. So you can either scroll through a resource record, or you can use this left-hand navigation section to move directly to the section that you want. And we can see that there are 3 agent records linked to this resource record, and they show the 3 different relational modes. So the first agent record that you see is for the Krispy Kreme Donut Corporation. This has been assigned the creator role, meaning that it is the entity responsible for having created the materials described. Creator can be understood broadly or narrowly as is appropriate for your situation, and you can assign more than one agent as the creator. But in this example, we just have one agent record who is the creator. The Krispy Kreme Donut Corporation is responsible for the creation of their company records. Oh, this was actually an error here, so I'm actually going to edit this. Sorry, I should have caught this beforehand. So, so the second agent and the second relational role is source. So that's this middle one that we're looking at. This designates the source of acquisition for the materials that are being described. And so here we can see that this person, Vernon Carver Rudolph, is the person who either donated or sold the collection to the archives. There's a relator field right in the middle here. Right now it's blank, but this is something that's optional that could be used to enter more information about what kind of source you have. This is a drop-down list with many, many options, but maybe a common one that might be helpful is to say that they are the donor. You could also potentially use this to clarify that it's a seller of some kind. So again, that's completely optional, but it is something available to you if you wanted to clarify what kind of source. And then let's look at this last one, the third one. This last relational role is where you specify that an agent is a subject. So this indicates that the materials being described are topically about the named person, family, or corporate entity in some way. So in this example, we are saying that this collection is in some significant way about Dunkin' Donuts. So they didn't create the materials, nor did they give it to the repository, but they are featured so prominently that we want to call them out so that people know that this collection is in some way about them. And I just want to spend a little bit of time clarifying this because we are going to be talking about subject records later, and there is a difference. So to be clear, when you want to indicate that an accession, a resource, a digital object, etc., record is about a person or about an organization, you need to create that entity as an agent record. And then when you link them to the resource record, for example, you specify in this role section that they are a subject. The reason I want to try and make that as clear as possible is because you cannot convert a subject record to an agent record or vice versa. So if you do end up sort of going down the other road, unfortunately, you would have some manual data cleanup to do at a later date. An agent record can be one of four types in ArchivesSpace. So you can have personal names, and that is what we are going to spend most of our time today. This tends to be what most folks use the most, but there are other types. So there are also names, corporate entities, and software. The last of which is a little bit of its own animal, and we won't spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to mention that it exists.
Rachel,
Yes.
yeah, we have a question before you move on. Can we specify our own relator fields?
Relator or role?
Just as own relator fields. I think we have role and the relator and then the agent link.
Sure. So I'll maybe try and answer both. The only three roles available are creator, source, or subject. Relator, there is a very long list available. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but we can check to see if this list is something that people can add to. So let me check.
Yeah, if you have the right permissions, there are certain lists
Yeah,
that allow you to change in the controlled values list.
Yeah.
So you can add your own. It looked like it was there.
So let's see, agent, I think it's this list. Nope, it's not that list. Identi, I think it might, nope. Um, no.
I would say, so we can move on. Check
Yeah,
out those
maybe we can,
controlled values lists. Yeah.
yeah, we can maybe check on this during the break for you. So what we're looking at right here, not to get too off topic, is the kind of controlled lists that anytime you see a drop-down list, some you can add to, some you cannot. So we will check during the break if this is a list you can add to or not. Because yeah, there's quite a lot of options here. Calligrapher, forger, uh, defendant. So I would first look at what's already in this list, but we will check if that's something you can add specific options to. Okay. Let's see. Agent records are shared across all repositories in an ArchivesSpace instance, which that is different from accession, resource, and digital object records. Those types of records are bound by the repository that they are in. But agent records, subject records, and a few other record types, those are shared across your instance. So if your ArchivesSpace database has multiple repositories, like the one that I am working in, just please note that your agent records and your subject records are shared across your entire instance. So that means that you can use them in each of your repositories and you don't have to create them anew when you switch between repositories. Agent records are designed to conform with the International Council on Archives International Standard Archival Authority Record for Corporate Bodies, Persons, and Families, which is abbreviated as ISAR-CPF. And they're also designed to support output in the encoded archival context, corporate bodies, persons, and families, EAC-CPF, data structure, and interchange standard. They're also designed to support the MARC XML format for authority data. If an authority record cannot be located in an external authority's database, agent records can also be created locally according to local guidelines or content standards. A few examples of which are the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, also known as AACR2, Resource Description and Access, RDA, or DAX. I mentioned these descriptive standards because, like, why should we care about our names being compliant with standards? And in addition to consistency, another reason is for interoperability. So if you are describing entities, or you want your collections discoverable in multiple systems. So maybe you participate in a consortium, or you participate in the SNAC cooperative, or you want to contribute to something like the Library of Congress name authority file, entity management and Wikidata, for example. Creating agent records in accordance with a professional content standard can ensure that you have consistent records and also limit the need to replicate your work. So that's just a consideration to keep in mind. So yeah, I think that is our kind of general agent overview. I also want to briefly mention that each ArchivesSpace user has a corresponding agent record. Did you know that? So I'm actually going to switch over, not in the test instance, I'm going to switch over to my NYU instance. And this is my agent record for me. And agent records are created automatically when a user record is created, but they can be edited. So for example, if I wanted to change this to change the order of my name, so maybe I wanted it to say Searcy, Rachel, I could edit it and put information in different fields. So I just want to mention that individual users get agent records because those can come into play if you use if you use events, or if you use the assessment module. So now that we've talked about what agent records are and what they're used for, let's talk about how you create them, how you manage them, what the different fields and subfields are all about. This is the point that I want to remind folks that what you see at your home instance might look different from what I'm showing you on the screen. The agents module underwent a very significant overhaul as part of the version 3 release, which came out in May of 2021. So if you are not yet on version 3 or higher, your agents module is going to look very different from this. Each agent record is made up of 5 sections. So I'm going to open one up to demonstrate that a little bit better. So let's open up this agent record for the Krispy Kreme Donut Corporation. And I'm going to open it up in edit mode because then you can see all of the parts a little bit better. So the 5 sections are basic information, record control information, identity information, description information, and relation. Each of these sections contains fields and or subrecords. But it's only the basic information section and the identity information that have fields that are required in order to save a new record to the database. Everything else is completely optional. So this is really where local guidelines and local practice will come into play in terms of deciding what you want to use, when you want to use it, and perhaps just as importantly, what parts of the record you decide you don't want to use. So I'm actually going to open up a clean personal name record template so that we can see all of the subfields, all the fields and subrecords a little bit better. So to do that, I'm going to go to Create, Agent, and then I'm going to select the type of agent I want to create, which is a person. So let's see. When a template for a new agent record is first opened, those sections with required fields will be opened and those required fields will be exposed. So you can maybe get an idea of that on the left-hand side where there's this little 1 by the name forms. But if we scroll down, we can get there as well. And the fields that are required are the ones with red stars. So we're down in this identity information section in the name forms subrecord. So the red star indicates that a field is required. So you are not able to save the record without information in this field. You can always hover over the titles of fields. So I'm just hovering over this name order field right now. And that will give you these little tool tips that provide some information on what specifically is supposed to go there. Optional subrecords can be opened by just clicking on the add, whatever the name of the subrecord is. So this entity ID, I can just click add entity ID. And then once it's opened, you'll be able to see what parts are required in order to save it. So I'm not going to create this right now. So if I want to get rid of this without creating the subrecord, I will just click on the X and then confirm removal. So there are lots of fields and subrecords that are possible, but I don't want you to be overwhelmed by them or think that you need to use every part of the record. A minimal agent record may be created by filling in only the required fields. And then you could always enhance it later by adding additional information in the other fields and subrecords. So I just kind of want to show you what the requirements are for each agent type. So for a personal agent record, that's the one I have open right now, you only need the primary part of the name. And then there's this field at the bottom of this section called the sort name. That is going to be generated by the system automatically after you fill in the requirements. You also need to specify the name order. By default, the value tends to be indirect. Indirect order is the format that goes, surname, comma, first name. So for example, Angelou, comma, Maya. But an example of a name in direct order might be someone like Joan of Arc or Plato. For a family, I'm just going to switch to that template. For a family record, the only requirement is the family name. And for a corporate body, the only requirement is the primary part of the name. For software, if people are creating those, you only need the software name. That said, if you're planning on creating a valid EAC CPF record or a MARC XML authority record, you are going to want to add more information than that. So I'm going to open up an agent record that has a little bit more information. So I am going to open up this personal name agent record for Tomi Arai, who is an artist based in New York City. And I'm going to open up in edit mode. So I am going to hop down to the name form section because that is where the requirements live. And so we can see that this information comes directly from the Library of Congress name authority file. That's what NACO authority file refers to. And actually, I am going to make some adjustments here because this looks like it was created upon import. So in the primary part of the name, we are going to put the last name, Arai. And then in the rest of name section, we are going to put her first name. Then in the date section, we have her birth date and it's open. So for kind of these different subfields, primary part of name, rest of name, dates, you can get guidance on how to use these fields, both from the ArchivesSpace user manual in the Help Center and also the subfields if you're looking at an external authority record, you can look at those subfields. I'm gonna save this. Let's look at a family name. And this is for the Adams family. And the only thing we have is the family name. And if you wanted or needed to use additional fields and subfields, you could refer to an external authority or a content standard on where to put those. And then lastly, we'll look at a corporate body. So we're going to look at this Asian American Bar Association of New York. And the primary part of the name holds the entire name. And it is also from the NACO authority file. And in this case, they've included the authority ID, which is completely optional. So these are all relatively minimal agent records because they have their requirements but they don't use these additional sub-records or other fields. So I'm going to hop back to that Tomi Arai record that we looked at. So I think I mentioned that the sort name is something that the system generates automatically. And the sort name is what you see up here that I'm highlighting. This is the form of the name that will be shown in ArchivesSpace displays, including the public user interface, and it gets exported in reports and other standardized outputs. So ArchivesSpace will automatically supply characters like commas and dashes. This gets more apparent in personal names than I think for some corporate body names, but if you have organizations that have like multiple parts, like, you know, New York University dot Department of English or whatever, those would be in two different fields, and then the sort name puts them together with that character of the period in between. So now we're going to talk about how you create agent records. So like I said before, you can do it a few different ways. You can do it within the context of a material description record that you're working on, so like an accession record or a resource record, for example. Or you can create one from the Create menu, which is what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to select Create, Agent, Person. I'm going to select this Publish checkbox because I want my agent to be included in exports, and I also want it to be visible in the public user interface. We are going to navigate down to the name form section. A little later, we are going to talk about what all this other stuff is, so don't worry. But right now, we're going to focus on, how do you create an agent record that has your requirements? So we're going to go down to name forms. And so I'm going to create an agent record for Dolly Parton, and I'm going to be patterning it off of the record in the Library of Congress name authority file. So this is her record in the Library of Congress. So for the source, I'm going to select NACO authority file because that is where I'm getting it from. The name order, we are keeping it as indirect because she uses the pattern of last name, comma, first name. And then the primary part of the name is Parton, and the rest of name is Dolly. So that is all I need to create a valid agent record in ArchivesSpace. And so I'm going to save this record right now. So I do that by selecting Save Person. If I wanted to save this record and immediately create another agent record, I could use this +1 button, which would save my record and bring up a new template, but I don't need to do that right now. So I'm just going to save this. So that is one way to create an agent record. And the way we've done it here is that now we have an agent record for Dolly Parton in our database. She's not linked to anything though. She's not linked to any resource records or anything like that. But we can also create agents from within the collection that we are working on. And when I do that, it not only creates the agent record, but it also automatically links it to whatever record I'm currently working in. So let's go back to our Krispy Kreme records, which I already have open, and I already am in this agent section. So let's say that in the course of working on this collection, I have decided that there are more people that I want to associate with it. So in this agent record section, I can either, if I'm at the top of it, I can select Add Agent Link. If I'm at the bottom, I can select this plus button. They do the same thing. So I'm going to select plus to add another agent link. And the first thing I want to do is specify the role. So in this case, I am saying that this person is a subject. So they are about this collection is about them in some way. They didn't create it. They didn't give it to us. They are just documented heavily. We have the option to include things like relator, like we talked about earlier, but that is optional, and I'm going to skip that for right now. So I have 3 different options for linking agents in this way. I can type ahead, I can browse, or I can create new records. So I use the type ahead option when I know for a fact that the agent is in there, and also usually that I'm going to be able to bring them up relatively easily. So just because I know for a fact that Dolly Parton is in my database, because I just did it, I can start typing ahead for her. So I just start typing Dolly, she comes up, and I can select her. Um, but I don't actually think she's relevant to this collection, so I'm gonna remove her by just clicking that X in the right-hand corner. But I can also browse for someone. And I can do that when maybe I have a feeling they might be in my database, but for whatever reason, if I'm typing ahead, they're not coming up. So to browse, I want to select this downward arrow and then browse. And then I get this display that kind of gives me different options to filter, to facet. So I could maybe narrow things down by just selecting personal names. I could narrow it down even further by saying only show me ones that are, NACO files. Those are options. But I can also use this text box to filter like more specifically. So again, just because we already saw this person, I'm going to filter for this person's last name, for Tomi Arai. So if I want to link them to this record, I just select this checkbox next to them and then click link. And now they are linked to my record. And if I want to deselect them, I can just click this X again. But let's say that my person is not in my database. I typed ahead for them, I didn't find them. I browsed for them and I didn't find them, so they're not in there yet. I can create a new agent record directly from this resource record, which is what I'm going to do right now. So to do that, I go to the downward arrow again. I go down to create, and then I select the type of agent record that I want to create. So I am gonna, so let's say I'm gonna create an agent record for Ben Affleck, noted Dunkin' Donuts fan, and I'm gonna create a relatively basic one. So I know he has a NACO record, and the primary, the primary part of the name is Affleck. The rest of the name is Ben. And his record does include his birth date. So let's see. Yep, that is all I want to include. So I'm going to say create and link, and this does two things. It creates an agent record for Ben Affleck, and it links it to the resource record that I am working in. If you want, you can open up the record for an agent just by clicking it and opening it up. So just kind of confirming what I said before, that these agent records are records unto themselves. So I'm going to save this for right now. And if I want to look at the agent record, I can view it here. So you can see, again, this is a record unto itself, and you can also see what other records it is linked to. Oh, I think this, the index is maybe not caught up yet, but this linked records section that I am highlighting, this is where you will see the accessions, the resources, the digital objects, whatever that this collection is, or this agent is linked to. That said, it will be bound by the active repository that you're in. So I'll only be able to see the records it's linked to in my active repository. So now that we are pretty familiar with the methods for creating and linking agents, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the agent record itself and the options that you have for describing entities. So like I mentioned earlier, the agents module was significantly expanded for version 3.0. So if you're working in a version earlier than that, what you see here, there will be a lot more than what's available to you locally. So I'm going to open up a blank personal name template. Okay, so we're gonna go section by section. So I'm gonna make this slightly bigger. Our first section is called Basic Information. This tells you what kind of agent record you're dealing with. So in this case, it's a person. And it also contains a checkbox called Publish. And so this checkbox determines whether the agent record will show up in the public user interface and be included in exports like EAD and MARC files. I'm going to select Publish because I want mine visible. In my work, I tend to always have agent records marked as Publish, and that's a preference you can adjust so that you don't have to select it every time, but that's absolutely a local decision to make. So that is basic information. The next section is called Record Control Information, and in this section, you can include information about the agent record. So the record, not information about the person. And I hope that distinction is clear. And so this is maybe with the expectation that the record might have originated outside of ArchivesSpace or might be shared with a system outside of ArchivesSpace. Like other parts of the staff user interface, you can navigate around this record by scrolling, like I'm doing right now, or using this left-hand navigation to jump directly to certain areas of the record. I say that even though it's sort of a basic navigation thing, because I find that the left-hand navigation it's easier for me to understand the 5 major sections of the record. I find that easier on the left-hand side than it is just via scrolling. I feel like the indentations are a little bit more clear. So within the record control information section, we have a lot of options. So I'm going to run through them. Record IDs, this is a repeatable subrecord. So for example, this could be a Library of Congress control number. It could be a Wikidata entity identifier or a SNAC identifier. It's for identifiers about the record itself. Record info is also information about the record itself as provided by the agency that created it. So that includes things like the agency that created it, any notes they have, a lot about kind of language and scripts, and publication status and maintenance information. Other agency codes are alternative codes for the agency or organization that was responsible for creating or maintaining the agent record. Convention declarations are information about the content standard used to formulate the record content. So for example, AACR2, RDA, DAX, etc. Metadata rights declaration. This is a subrecord that shows up in multiple record types across ArchivesSpace, and it's a way to convey the conditions under which the metadata in this agent record is available for use and reuse. Maintenance history. These are events associated with the creation and maintenance of the record. So maybe there was a major update or a revision of some kind. Sources, this is information on the sources that were used to formulate the content of the record. So this might come into play and or be helpful if perhaps you are contributing information to or getting information from an external source like SNAC or the Library of Congress Name Authority file. This source field matches up, I believe, with the 670 field in a Name Authority file. And alternate sets are for 2 or more authority records derived from different authority systems. So all of this information is, you can check on the Help Center if you want clarity. And again, you always have those tooltips where you can hover over the title. But yeah, so that is our record information section. And now we will move on to identity information. So this section is for information about the agents themselves. So that's kind of in contrast to the section that we were just looking at, which was all about the agent record. This is about the agent. So we looked at this section a little bit earlier when we were kind of focusing on just the sort of more bare bones type of record, because this is the section that has our required fields. But we're going to kind of go into it a little bit further. So the fields and the subrecords in this section include information that identifies and disambiguates a specific agent, clarifies maybe authorized or variant forms of their name, and includes information on the source of those name forms, as well as unique identifiers that have been assigned to the agent. So this first subrecord, called Entity ID, these are for identifiers that are associated with the person, family, or corporate body, and that's different from that record ID that is in the section above. So this might be something like an ORCID identifier. Name forms, we already looked at this a little bit, but this is where you record the authoritative form of a name, any variants you might wish to include. I am not going to get into all of the specifics for all of these other fields, like when you use a suffix, when you use a fuller form, when you use a qualifier, what you should do if you're creating a record for royalty, or someone who has maybe like a title as part of their name. There is a vast universe of cataloging rules for all of those circumstances. And there's a lot of good bibliographic and archival resources that you can refer to if you have questions about specific name issues. I don't want us to get derailed on that front. Dates of name use down here. So this is for when an agent has used multiple names in the course of their existence. You could use this to indicate, when they go by one name and when they go by another. I do want to mention that if you are working on a record for someone who has transitioned, I would strongly recommend that you refer to the best practices for queer metadata for guidance on that front, and I can share the link with that during the break. Parallel names down here is where you can record parallel forms of a name, maybe in a different language, a script, or a transliteration. Okay, so we are going to move on to the next section, which is called descriptive information. And that's sort of exactly what it sounds like. It's a place to record further descriptive information about the agent. And one of the sort of unique parts of this of this section is that you use more controlled access terms. So I'll show you what that looks like. Dates of existence, you can use this to record birth and or death dates for people, or dates of activity for corporate entities, for example. Gender, this subrecord allows you to describe the gender identity of persons. I do want to mention that I believe last year, the Program for Cooperative Cataloging, which is the PCC, released a report with recommendations against including information on people's gender in their authority records, as well as guidance to remove that information from existing records. And this is also something that is echoed in the best practices for queer metadata that I mentioned. So this is absolutely a local decision for you to make, and it is functionality available to you. But I did want to share that because there are increasing conversations about the ethics of doing so. So you can read up on that and make your own decisions. I am not going to go through all of these other subrecords in this section. So like places, occupations, functions, topics, because they are relatively self-explanatory in terms of the types of information they are recording. So for example, you can use the occupations subrecord to record the occupation someone had. You can use the topics subrecord to record things that someone was associated with. So for example, maybe like a social movement, an area of study. But I do want to point out that these subrecords use controlled terms as opposed to free text fields. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to go to places, and then it's asking you to kind of clarify like what that relationship with the place is. So I'm just going to say residence. So let's say, for example, that I want to indicate that this person was strongly associated with the East Village neighborhood of New York City. So I'm just going to type ahead because I suspect it's in here. And you do need to either use existing terms in your database or create them. It's not a free text field that you can just type whatever you want in. But this is repeatable, so I could add additional places like that. So that's how these subrecords work, is they use controlled headings. All right, moving down to the notes section. So you can add a few different kinds of notes. Let me just open this up so you can see. And I think the most common is probably going to be this first one, the biographical historical note, which can be really useful for the purposes of disambiguation, but also for the purposes of description. External documents, you can use this to link to external documentation that you might have. So maybe this is a biographical file, a reference work. Maybe the donor supplied you with a biography of themselves, and that might live in a collection file, so that you might want to point to. So this is a very flexible field that can account for a lot of different situations. And then at the bottom, we have our last section, which is called relation information. And this is used to indicate relationships to other agents or relationships to materials that might be held outside of ArchivesSpace. So the first subrecord is related external resources. So these are materials related to the agent that might be held elsewhere. So maybe, for example, you have someone's professional papers, but their personal papers are held by a different institution, and you want to explain that. And then related agent, you can use this subrecord to specify relationships between agents. So in the case of people within a family, you can have a parent-child relationship. And in the case of a corporate entity, you might have a predecessor successor relationship happening. So that was a very quick run through of all of the different ways to describe entities. There's a lot here, but like I said earlier, you don't have to use all of these sections or each part of every section. It's available to you, but you don't have to use all of that. Some things might make sense in specific contexts with specific agents or for specific institutions. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed or that you necessarily need to record information for the sake of it. But hopefully now that you know more about the record, you can make informed decisions. So I just kind of want to do a quick recap before we move on to another aspect of agents. So we talked about how you link an agent to a record, but let's just sort of run through it again. So we're in our Krispy Kreme records. We're hopping down to the agent section, and we are going to select add agent. We're going to specify what their relationship is to the record. So again, I'm just going to say that they're a subject. And then we have our kind of three options again. We can type ahead, we can browse, or we can create. Removing an agent that is linked to a resource or another type of record is really simple. All you have to do is click on this X. So maybe upon reflection, decided that, maybe this collection isn't really about Ben Affleck. Or maybe we deaccessioned those materials, and so it doesn't make sense to say that anymore. So I'm just gonna write on this kind of blue line where his agent record is. I'm gonna click this X. And then I want to remove what is now an empty subject record. So I'm gonna click the X again and confirm removal. To be clear, doing this does not delete the agent record from your database. So we still have our agent record for Ben Affleck. It's just he's not linked to this collection anymore. So we have seen just how expansive the agents module is. And I want to talk about a way to change how much of those fields and subrecords you see in their display. So there's two modes. There's what we call full mode and what we call light mode. Full mode is what we've been looking at so far. It's all of the sections, all the subrecords, and all of the fields. But some users or some institutions might prefer to view and edit records in what we call light mode, which is a more streamlined display. And this sort of resembles what the display looked like prior to version 3. So we are going to go back to, I'm going to look at an existing one. I think that would be easier. To switch modes, you have to be in edit. So right now I just have this record open in view mode. I need to open it up in edit. And in this kind of top menu bar, furthest to the left, I'm gonna make it bigger so you can all see, you see that there's this little button called light mode and a checkbox. So if I click that, and actually, let me just kind of scroll through the record again so you can kind of see all that is there. Pay special attention to this record control information section. If I click this checkbox that says light mode, you can see it kind of collapse. So it immediately streamlines the record. It removes a lot of the sub-records from your view. So a repository manager or someone with systems administrator permissions must first turn on the ability to view and work with agents in full mode. So I'm currently signed in as the administrator to this instance, so I just kind of want to show you how to do that. So I'm going to go to the gear icon and manage groups. And I'm going to look at first this group called advanced data entry users. And let's say I want these people to be able to work in either light or full mode. So first I want to make sure that they have the permission to create, update, and delete agents, which they do. But I also want to make sure that they have the ability to edit additional sections of agents enabled by the full mode of this repository. So I'm going to make sure that's selected. If I wanted to also make sure that they could view and edit contact details, I would select that for them as well. So let's say save group for that. So I want those folks to be able to kind of use either mode. But maybe I have another group that I want to kind of remove those possibilities from them. So I'm going to go to this basic data entry users group. I do want them to be able to create agent records, so they have that permission. But I don't think I want them to, for example, view and edit their contact details, nor do I want them to use that full mode. So I want to keep these unchecked. So I just kind of want to show you what that looks like. So I'm gonna change and sort of take on the persona of one of these basic users, kind of put on their account as a costume. So if I say create agent person, you can see that uh, by default, they are only able to create and work with agents in this light mode. They don't have all of the record control information section, and they don't have the ability to kind of toggle between. So that's just sort of an option for you as like a kind of local decision that you can make. So I'm gonna log back in as the administrator. One of the last things I want to cover is, so this might be appropriate when you have two different records for the same agent and you want to consolidate them. This can happen for so many different reasons, like maybe you merged multiple databases into one, maybe you accidentally imported an agent not realizing it was already in your database. I do want to explain that merging agent records does involve the permanent deletion of one of your agent records. But the merging process accounts for linkages that exist between agent and material description records. So if you merge two agent records, any records that are linked to the agent you are getting rid of will get linked to the one that you are keeping. So the linkages remain, but I do just want to be explicit about this because even though there are multiple steps along the way where you can cancel or go back, once the merge is completed, it cannot be reversed. So let's walk through what this looks like. So let's say we have two agent records for the same person, this Rocky Chin. And this could be for a variety of reasons. This is actually an example from my home institution where we processed this person's papers. And in the course of doing that, we created a local name record for them. And then years later, I got NACO trained and I created a name authority record for this person according to those guidelines. And so I wanted to get all of that good information back into ArchivesSpace, but rather than hand edit my existing record, I imported the authority record and want to merge them together. But in doing that, I also want to keep some information that was in the first record that we created, our local record. So to do a merge, open the record that you want to keep. So I'm going to open up this second one. In a lot of documentation about this, this is called the target record. And I like to think of it as like the record that has more of what you want to retain. So in this case, it's going to be the one that has the authority information. I then am going to select this merge button from the menu bar. And then you want to bring up the other record that you want to merge into this one. So you can do this either by typing ahead or browsing. I tend to browse when I'm doing this just because I want to be absolutely sure that I have the right record. But you can do whatever you prefer. So I just browsed for it here. I'm selecting it and then saying link. And then you want to select merge. You'll see a dialog box that explains everything that's going to happen, that one of your records is going to be deleted, and that any records that are linked to the record that will get deleted are going to be linked to your target record. So if you want to move ahead, you select compare agents. And like I said, there are multiple points in the process to stop it completely. You can cancel or sort of go back. The important thing to pay attention here are these headers at the top of your column. So on the left, this one says this record will be updated and this one will be deleted. So it's very clear. And you can see sort of all the one that I'm keeping has more of the information. But I'm just going to kind of scroll through. So this example is pretty straightforward just because there's such an imbalance. But if I wanted to keep and kind of bring over some information from the right side, I could do that. So let's see, I'll show you where that would even happen. So yeah, if I wanted to include this name form or replace that, if I kind of had a mix and match situation, I could definitely do that by saying, clicking this add or replace button here. But I do want to scroll all the way down to the end because let's say, for example, I know that our local record has things I want to keep. So let's say I want to keep the contact details. So I'm going to select this add button here. And then there's this external document. It's called super important donor promises I made. I want to include that as well. Before I go further, I'm going to select Merge Preview. This does not do anything, but it's sort of what it sounds like. I get a preview of what my new consolidated record will look like, and that will allow me to confirm that I like what I see. Again, this doesn't do anything, but it just shows me kind of what will happen based on my selections. And so I just want to make sure that, yeah, the external documents that I selected are coming over. If I'm happy with it, I'm going to select continue, and then I'm going to select merge. And again, this has, all of the information from my authority record, but I want to just confirm that the contact information is here, and that came from the one that got merged into it, and the external documents also came over. I
Rachel,
want to, yes, go ahead.
before you leave this, can you explain the difference between add and replace when merging records?
Yeah, so add would be basically like you're keeping what is already on the left-hand side in your target column, and you're adding an additional thing. So like for the name forms example, you would have two names versus replace, which is basically like overlaying. I hope that makes sense. But there's a lot of good documentation in the Help Center about merging. So I would definitely recommend that you look at that. Okay, we have 2 more sections in 5 minutes, but I think we can get through it. I want to show you one more thing before we move into how agents behave in the public user interface, and that is how you can mandate required fields that go beyond the system requirements. So like we said before, fields that are required by ArchivesSpace to create and save a valid record are indicated by a red star. So if we go to the, oh wait, sorry. If we go to the name forms, oh, that's why I'm in light mode. If we go to the name form section, it's the name order and the primary part of the name. But let's say, for example, I'm the repository manager or system administrator. I can also use the requirement, or I can use this to enforce some local requirements. So maybe, for example, I want to make sure that this source field is also always used. And I can do that in a systematic way by changing what the required fields are. So to do that, go to Browse Agents, and in this leftmost button in the menu bar, go to Edit Required Fields. And you do have to do this for each different agent type. So I'm going to say person, and I can make so many different selections here in terms of what I might want to require, but I'm going to say the source is now required, which it wasn't before. So just to show you what that looks like, if I were to create a new agent, oh, I might not have saved that actually. We're going to go back and make sure it's saved. So if we go down to name forms again, this source field, which didn't have a red star before, now has a red star. And so if I wanted to create a record. I am blanking, but we're going to create a record for Madonna for some reason, which normally this alone would be enough. But now I'm also saying source needs to be in there. If I tried to save this, it won't let me. It says source property is now required but missing. So again, completely optional, but it is something that you can do to kind of use the system to enforce consistency in local practice. I suspect we are going to go a few minutes over, but we are very close to the end of this section. So I just want to kind of get through, but I do want to convey that I'm paying attention to time. So I want to talk briefly about how agent records behave in the public user interface. So I'm going to switch to that. And there are at least 3 ways to search and retrieve agent records in the PUI. So one is to browse, and I can browse by clicking names. And this will bring up all of the agent records that are set to publish, which you can then narrow further by filtering and doing like a text facet on the side. You can also search. So we're going back to the home page. I can search for, let's see, who did we knew was already in here. We can search for Tomi or Rai. And that will bring up every place that they come up in the records, including their personal name records. So let's say I could filter by person, which would bring her up. And if I click on this, this will bring up their agent record as well as their linked records. The last way is from within a record. So let's say I'm within this collection. I can go down to this creator section or any other names that are associated with it, and I can click on that. I also just want to briefly bring up our Rocky Chin record, just because we looked at it just now. And so we have him here. The last thing that we're going to discuss about agent records is how to import and export them. So we're going to actually go back to the staff interface. And so ArchivesSpace allows the import and export of data from standardized formats, such as the MARC XML authority record or an EAC CPF record. On the ArchivesSpace website, you can find the metadata maps that show you the fields for these different record types and how they behave for importing and exporting. We're going to start with exports because they're more straightforward. So to do that, you're going to navigate to the record that you're interested in. So let's find our, let's just find one that we like. We're going to go to Krispy Kreme. So navigate to your record, and in the menu bar, you're going to select export. Oh, I'm sorry, we're not exporting resources, we're exporting agents. I'm sorry about that. Got a little distracted. So we're gonna go to Rocky Chin. So you have 2 options here. You can say download EAC CPF or download MARC XML authority. So I'm gonna do both. And if I open them up in an editor, like we're going to open up the EAC CPF record in Oxygen. I'm sorry, it's a little small, but it is all there. And then similarly, the MARC authority record, you can see it in MARC Edit. Because folks are always curious about how to work in bulk, there are API endpoints for agent records that allow you to do bulk exports of your agent records. So if that's something you're interested in, please refer to the API documentation. If you just want a list of all your agent records, you can do a few different things. You can run a report. So report, I can go to the gear icon and reports, and I can find like the name records, for example. I can get a report that way. I can also go to Browse Agents and either everything, or I can do like just a selection, and then I can select Download CSV, and that'll give me a CSV of those. So that's exports, and we're gonna just finish really quickly by talking about importing. So let's say that we want to import from an external source, like SNAC or LCNF. I'm gonna show you both of those things. So let's say we want to import the authority record for Marsha P. Johnson from the Library of Congress name authority file. So this is her. So I've already downloaded it, and I'm going to go to the gear icon and run a background job and create job, import data. And then you select the type of data that you're importing. This is a MARC XML authority. And I am going to deselect this import and link related subjects. So those are for kind of like what are in your 3xx fields for like related fields, related topics. I don't want those included. I add my file. You can add more than one file if you want, but I prefer to do these one at a time, and then say start job. So this runs like any other background job. You get sort of a log that's happening real time, and if it runs successfully, you get this green message. And so now we can see that we have a very robust agent record for Marsha P. Johnson that we did not have to create manually or through pasting and cutting. And the process works the same if you want to import an EAC CPF record. So I'm going to import a record from SNAC for the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. They have an export function. And this works the same way as a background job. And this is an EAC CPF record. And it works the same. While this is running, I'm just going to mention that there is another way to import agent records from the Library of Congress that Brittany is going to demonstrate a bit later. And here is our New York Taxi Workers Alliance. Just to wrap it up, something that I've noticed in trainings is that anytime I explain a piece of functionality, the response is often, that's great, how do you do it in bulk? And there isn't really a bulk upload functionality for agent records, but there are a few ways that you can kind of do that quickly. So you can import an EAD file or a MARC bibliographic file, and any agents or subjects that are linked there will get imported as part of the process. So that is something you could explore or kind of create a skeleton record to kind of get that going. There is also one other background job for importing data that's sort of along those lines that import data, and it's called MARC bibliographic subjects and agents only. So you could use that to import a MARC record for a collection, but instead of creating a resource record, it will only create the subjects and the agents that are kind of linked to it. So that is an option for you. So that brings us to the end of our section on agents. I know that there were some questions and maybe there are even more, but we are going to take a break, and after which we will come back and have a few minutes for more questions. So I know we're slightly behind, but I think we should take our full break and we can maybe adjust the question period if needed. Does that sound okay, Brittany?
It does. We do have several questions in the Q&A, so we'll get to those when we come back.
Okay, so we are going to take a 15-minute break. So that would be, let's see, 37 minutes after the hour, because I know people are in different time zones. We'll put it in the chat though. So take a break and we'll come back and do questions. Okay, so I want to just start with a question that was introduced during the last section, sorry, which was, can we specify our own relator fields? And during the break, I did confirm that yes, you can add to this list. I will type the answer, I will type the list name into here in a bit, but it's called the linked agent archival record relateds or relators list, and you can add values to that if you would like to. If I could make a suggestion, there's a few different questions about using the plugin for the for importing from the Library of Congress. I would suggest that we put a pin in those because that's something that Brittany is going to talk about later. So we can come back to those questions after. But I think in the interest of time, I would like to suggest that we hold off on those now. I'm just going to go through. Is it always best to describe a person or corporate body as an agent record when a collection is about that person or organization instead of as a subject record? Correct. If they are a person or if they're a corporate body, always create them as an agent record. And then when you link them to a collection or something, you specify their role as a subject, but do not create them as subject records. Is there any benefit to split the name out instead of keeping it in one line for name records? So I assume that question is for like a personal name. Is there a benefit to putting the different parts of the name in, the primary, rest of name, dates fields? You can always do whatever you would like. But I would say that there is a benefit to putting those elements of a name in the discrete fields, because when you export them, especially if you're exporting a MERC record, that will put those fields, that information in the correct subfield. If you're, giving your records to something like OCLC Connection or a consortium, there may be requirements for kind of what a valid record looks like. So that would be my suggestion, but you can obviously do what you would like. Let's see, I'm skipping this one about the plugin. Also the plugin. Are the place subjects getting pulled by any database, or can we link to something like geonames? So those are getting pulled from within your ArchivesSpace instance. They're getting pulled from, in the case of the places subrecord, it's pulling the geographic subject records that are already in your database. So correct, they do need to be in your database. It's not searching externally for you. Is there a specific field for adding past names to corporate entity agents so that they are discoverable in search, as in a search for a past name for the organization will pull up the agent record that has the contemporary name of the organization? I believe you could do this a few different ways. That would be up to you. You could potentially create those names as different agents and specify the relationship by this relation information, this related agents subrecord at the bottom. That would be one way. Another way, if you want to kind of keep it all together, is to add more than one name forms. So you could have an authorized form and another form. I think it really kind of depends what you would like to do, but that could potentially be a place where you would use that dates of name use subrecord in the name forms to say, from 1980 to 1990, it was called this, and then from 1991 to whatever, that is up to you. You mentioned the snack cooperative. Do you know if the plugin works in version 4.1.1 or is behind? I do not know. I know that the plugin is listed as being a beta version. I'll put a link in the chat to what it currently says, which it says that it is currently it says that it is compatible with version 3.0 or later, but I do not know yet if it has been tested and or is working on version 4 and above. But that's a great question. Could you link to the software agent recommendations? You mentioned it at the beginning and I did not catch them. I don't know if I would say that there's specific recommendations. I would refer to the help center, but there was another question about software that maybe I can tackle at the same time. Is there a way to easily determine software by version if you do not include it in the name? So software 3.0 versus software 4, but calling the primary name just software. I do think this is maybe more of a local decision that is to be made. In the software agent record, the most important, the required field is the name. There is a separate field for the version, but I think if the question is whether or not it makes sense to specify the version or create different agents for different versions, I think that really gets into local practice. I would maybe recommend posting that to the user list to see what other folks are doing. I know that I think my understanding is that the agent type for software is primarily intended to help record like preservation metadata. And so like the software being an agent that acts upon materials and kind of wanting to record that. But I think it's kind of a local decision, and I'd be curious to hear what other folks are doing. So I hope that gets at what you were asking, but please feel free to clarify if you would like something different. If someone is the donor, creator, and subject of a collection, or two of the three, is it okay to add them 3 times? We have been doing that here, though it looks redundant on the public side because we don't know how our records might map to other metadata schema if exported. I would say do what works for you, what works for your collections, and what works for your users. And like the major consideration would be kind of like you were saying, like if you contribute your records to a consortium or something, they might have requirements, but feel free to add them if that feels helpful to you in kind of clarifying the situation. I think we maybe got all of them aside from the ones about the plugin. Yeah, so maybe we can move on to subject records, Brittany.
That sounds good. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna share my screen. You should be seeing subjects on the screen from ArchivesSpace. Best way to describe it. So we are going to first go over subjects and creating them, importing them, and all of that, and then get into the plugin, the LCNAF plugin, and from there Q&A and then classification. So just want to go over the agenda one more time. So subjects are one of the easier records to create in ArchivesSpace. Really what you need to determine for yourself and your institution is where are these subjects coming from? What's the source of these subjects? Because there's so many out there to choose from. You have more than just Library of Congress to choose from. And if you're at a unique institution, that Library of Congress, as you know, isn't as up to date on contemporary terms as we would like, you may want to choose to use different sources. As listed over here on the screen, you can see that we have multiple sources being used within just this test instance. So subject records record terms describing the principal themes, topical content, and format characteristics of materials described in your ArchivesSpace instance. They are established and maintained separately and may be linked to accession, resource component records, digital objects, and digital object component records. So those main top 3 types of records you can create that are repository specific. You can create subjects for each of those and link them to them, and then use them in this repository and any other repository that you have as a part of your ArchivesSpace instance. So subjects like agents are not repository specific. So once you create it in one, it can be used in another. Subject terms function most effectively in ArchivesSpace when derived from broadly shared standard thesauri or controlled vocabulary. So we say that in meaning Library of Congress subject headings or art and architecture thesaurus, but there are so many out there that and more being created that you have options, like I said. So when creating subject records, ArchivesSpace users should adhere closely to the rules and standards associated with the specific controlled vocabulary, thesaurus, or authority file from which subject terms have been derived. I say that because there are set up standards, right? We have DAX, we have all these description standards. But as our one of the favorite phrases to say in archives is it depends, and this does truly depend on your institution and what you would like to do. So you could get all willy-nilly with your subject terms, and I'm not going to fault you for it because sometimes certain controlled vocabularies just don't work for you and your institution. But remember that subject records are not used to identify persons, families, corporations, and software. We already went through agents. That's what those are for, right? And so remember that these are topical, these are geographical terms, right? And we're going to get more into what that means. So when you are creating a subject, you can create them in multiple ways. So we are currently on the browse list for subjects. These are all the subjects available to you in this ArchivesSpace instance. If you wanted to create a subject from here, you can just click create subject. If you wanted to edit ones, you can edit and view the ones that are already created. If you want to create from the create dropdown, you can do that as well, and it would take you to an empty one. But if you were to go into a resource record, let's edit this one. If you were to go in edit mode of a resource record, this is where you would link them, right? So it shows you all the ones already linked. You can add more from the dropdown. You can browse or create. So it brings up the create record, the record for creating a subject term, just a new window, and you can create from there, right? And link. So you're creating and linking at the same time rather than doing it outside of it. It's creating it for the whole instance, so not just for this resource record. So once it's created, it's there, it's for people can use it. It's not just for this collection. So let's go into create. Yes, we'll leave. So as I said, subject records are one of the easiest records to create in ArchivesSpace once you've identified the subjects that you want to use and would like to link to your collections and other records in ArchivesSpace. You just create them. There is a bulk import for them, and I will show you that later, which doesn't link them. It just creates them, and then you have to do the linking. So when you are looking at a new subject record, you will see the red asterisks, right? And those are for what's required. So the source, where did it come from? This is a drop-down controlled values list that is pre-populated with a few of them, like Library of Congress subject headings and a few local sources, a few others. But as you can see, this is a ton. This is because of imports into this instance, as they will be added to this controlled values list, and then you can edit the controlled values list as well. So this is one with you have the permission, like if you're a system admin, you can work on that controlled values list. Because we have so many Library of Congress subject headings, listen here, you probably don't want people just choosing the wrong one. You want to merge those and make sure we have the right one, right? So the source for this one, let me show you what I'm creating a subject for. So if we were going to browse resources, you'll see here that we have this Eleanor loose quilt collection. So we have a quilt collection in here, and I want to make subject terms for this quilt collection. So in our create, when we're creating this, we're going to create quilt terms, right? So I went to Art and Architecture Thesaurus, one of the sources that we use over at Georgia State University. We mostly use Library of Congress FAST subject heading, and then some other specific controlled vocabulary like homeosaurus and stuff like that because of the different collecting areas that we have. So I went to Art and Architecture and I searched for quilts. So many different terms for quilts. So you want to be specific when you're doing this, right? So we're going to say that we have a commemorative quilt in this collection. I'm going to copy that term. We're going to make sure we get the preferred English term here, right? The source is going to be Art and Architecture. When you scroll down, you'll see the terms and subdivisions. The term and the type it is are required. Source, term, type. Those are the only things required when you are creating a subject. You will see that there's other optional fields that you could use, like authority ID. This is for those controlled vocabularies, like if you were using Library of Congress subject heading and it had an authority ID number, you would copy and paste that here. It makes it easy for you to use it. And you can also just use the URI for that authority record and put it there. And then you can do a scope note that covers what this subject term is meant to be about and what it's not meant to be about. So you can give a definition of the term here, especially if you're using topical terms and things like that that have specific reference to a time period, an event, an era in history, that kind of thing. You may want to give that definition, explain what it is, but it's not required. It's just a handy note to have. So we're going to paste the term we got, commemorative quilts. Sometimes when you paste, it will tab it over. So we have commemorative quilts. So we have to decide what type of term is this. So we have options here. These are all the 10 types of terms that you can find in in the subject record. So there's 10 types to choose from: cultural context, function, genre/form, geographic, occupation, style/period, technique, temporal, topical, uniform title. There is a reason behind that. It's just a standardization of subject terms. And this is not a field to be added to. As you can see, it did not import anything from any of the other imports. It just stays this way. So we're going to choose that this, I choose topical for the most part, depending on what it is. But let's say we want to expand this. We want to add more than one term. So you know how when you see a subject term, we have the separation, the subdivision. So we have, let's say, literature, American literature, and it's in 19th century. So it's American literature -- 19th century. So in order to create these subdivisions in ArchivesSpace, you have to add on a second term, right? And choose a type for that term. So do the same required elements, required fields. You can do that by clicking this add button here, or this add terms as subdivision here. You can even move these around. Say you want something, you put it in the wrong order, you can move them and make sure it's in the right order. So we can do 20th century commemorative quilts here. And the type, that's temporal, right? Because this is a time period. So that's really all you need to do, and then you can save it. You can always save and start creating another record if you have several subject terms you want to create. And you're trying to create these records, you can just keep pressing +1, but again, there is a way to both do it. So you save it, subject created. If you're looking to add, say, external documents, more about where this came from and this location, you can add that here. If you want to do a metadata rights declaration, that is also a subfield that is an option here. Again, not required until you add it, and then they have their own required elements for the most part. Let's save that. So now this is created. We have all that we need here. Once you've created a subject term, it's published. There's no publish checkbox for a subject term. It's published. All you need to do is link it to record, and then you can, once that, if that resource accession, whatever is published, then you can see these subject terms, right? And you can see at the top here how it would look on the public side. So we have the subdivision, we have commemorative quilts, 20th century, right? We have that. And so quick and easy, really no fuss when creating these. I would just come prepared to, you know, make all these subject terms. I would also highly emphasize policy decisions around it, not just the sources that you're using, but also are you going to have an ArchivesSpace instance that has thousands of subject terms? Will every resource have subjects links to it? Will you link to folders and items and series? Like how do you want to decide how to use subjects and how will best serve your users? So that's a decision that has to be made internally on how you want to do such. We tend to, at Georgia State University, link subjects just to collection records, so to the resource records, the top level. And then if we have oral histories, we would link subjects to the oral history interviews, like the individual ones, as well as agents to them, so people can easily identify them as well. But remember, especially if you're using the ArchivesSpace public user interface, those are keyword searchable, like your finding aids and everything are keyword searchable. So subjects, though handy, aren't really as required, and people can search the notes, the titles, everything when searching for these terms, that kind of thing. So consider that when you're making them. So let's go and link this to a resource record. So we're going to find our quilt collection. We're going to go into edit mode. We're going to click on subjects over here on the left. You see we have quilts and quilt makers, but we're going to add commemorative quilts. You can do that by typing ahead or by clicking browse. And browse will let you filter. So you don't have to go through all 174. You can also limit by source and by term type. So if you just want the geographic ones or, oh yeah, I didn't want, yeah, geographic ones or occupation ones, you can do that. So we've done that, we've saved it. And it should be published, so we can actually view publish and see what this looks like on the other side. So when you are in a public user interface for ArchivesSpace, if you use it, you know that at least in the most recent version, subjects are scrolled down on the collection view. If you keep scrolling under subjects, and it's under topical, and you can click on that, of course. Oops. You can click on the subject and see what else is linked to that subject, which is great to have and may be handy if you're using subjects. And it's handy when you're using subjects in ArchivesSpace. Going back to this subject, you can actually, when you're viewing subjects, see what are linked to them on the staff side too. So it will show you linked records as well when it is in view mode. I want to emphasize with sources, again, you can use different sources. You can also use your own made up policies and standards around creating subjects and agents, right? So if you wanted to do that, what you would choose is local sources as the source for the subject term you created. If it didn't come from one of the standard vocabularies, one of the major vocabularies, or one of the newer ones that have all that information out there, and you just create it internally. You can choose local sources, and that can be the source for your subject term. Okay. And if you're like, I don't want this anymore, you do have the ability to delete these depending on your permissions. We also have the ability to merge subjects. So if you were to go into subject records, I created two subject records of the same name. So we have two writer subject terms. So we're going to go into view mode for this one. And we're going to click merge. So when you do this one, what you choose to, what you're searching for here is the subject term that will, the subject record that will be merged into the current one you are looking at. So we want the other writer. And this will merge into this one, and we'll keep the information from the one we are currently viewing. So that way we don't have two of the same. And now they are merged. So the last one had sources not specified, which is an import feature. Like if you import something without source, it will designate it as that. So now this one has kept local sources, the term and the type, occupation and writer. So we have kept that. We've identified the source for it, and we didn't have to go and delete the other one. We just merged them. Any linked records to either of them would be now linked to the current writer subject record. So you wouldn't have to move over linked records or anything like that. You wouldn't have to like link it again. They continue to be linked to this now merged record. So let's talk about importing subject terms. So you have the ability to import subject terms through background jobs. So any way you get the background jobs, you can import. So we're going to background jobs, import data. So with subject terms, they're a CSV file. From the dropdown, you would choose subject CSV. How you get that file is what I'm going to show you now. So if you are, I'm pretty sure 3.5 or newer version, you should have the ability to access bulk import templates. If not, they should be on GitHub. And from this gear menu drop down, you would click on bulk import templates. That's what I'm going to leave. And you scroll through, you see all the CSV files and other bulk imports that you can get, and you would download the subject CSV. As I mentioned before, this template is for creating, not linking. You're just creating and importing those into ArchivesSpace, and then you would have to link them from there. It won't link to them. If you import archival objects, like if you do that kind of bulk import, you do have the ability to add subjects there. So if you can create subjects essentially by doing that bulk import, which was the Harvard bulk import template. So if you were to choose this, you could do it as well. And I'm pretty sure, and then the accession CSV has the ability to add subjects as well. So you have that option as well to do. So if we were to download that, you would get this long CSV file. Let me zoom in. Which has every possible field you would want from the standard subject record in ArchivesSpace, right? So even the fields that aren't required are there. But remember, you have required fields and you would need to fill those out. It gives you the option to add up to 5 terms. I would not delete any of these fields just in case it causes the background job to fail. But if you wanted to add a subject term, you can have the authority ID. Remember, that's not required.
Hey, Brittany.
Yes.
Are you intending to show the CSV?
I did it again.
Yeah.
This is not the only time today that I've done this. I'm sorry, guys. Let's do this. I shared just ArchivesSpace originally and not my whole screen. So you should see the CSV file. Are we seeing it now?
Yes, we see it. Thank you.
Awesome. So as I was saying, this has a field for every subfield within the subject record in ArchivesSpace. So even the ones not required are here. So all possible options are here. And then the terms, there's up to 5 that you can add. And then again, don't delete columns or fields from this top row. Just import as is, leave blank, whatever is not required, leave blank, and import from there. So if we wanted to do this, we would say, let's add another subject source, and then the term itself, we have a term and type, right? So we could say, I'm gonna say musician. I'm a music archivist, and that is an occupation. So we would save that, right? And then we would go back to here, go back to creating a background job, import data, choose a subject CSV. Now remember, this is where you bulk create them. So I just made one, but you can create like 100 if you wanted. Just remember, the more data in there, the longer the background job takes, and the more likely is to fail if you make a little mistake, right? Refresh page, and now record belongs to, ooh, anyway. Now we have musicians. And because we added this source called Library of Congress, the LCSH source, now if we were to like edit this, we'd see that as one of another Library of Congress subject heading. So again, you may want to have a standard way of creating this so you don't get a long list of things being changed by import. And because you don't have more options and you're choosing from the already given options for type, we chose occupation and it chose occupation from this list. So those are, that's how importing works. You also, if you were to create a background job to import data, you would see that you can do the MARC XML bibliographic subjects and agents only. You can import subjects using that as well. So if you've created MARC XML records for subjects, you can import those into here. If you were to look at subjects and review it, you'll see that there's no way of exporting these. So you don't really export subject records. You can, if you're in the browse list, you can download a CSV of it, and that will give you info on each subject. So if you wanted just standard info, which is title, the first term, not even more than one term, it's just the first term, the source, and if it was audited, you can find that here. So you can get a CSV listing of all 175 subject terms within this instance of ArchivesSpace, but it doesn't give you all the information about it. It's just a way to like get that information or part of that information if you need it in any way. Do you have any questions about subjects before I move on?
There's a local practice question about should you limit the subjects associated with the resource? I don't know if you want to address that now or in the Q&A.
I will say that as you saw when we were creating a resource record and you're adding subjects, if you create 5 or more, like add 5 or more to it, you get where it won't load. You have to load it. On the public side, depending on what version of it, it can become unwieldy. It's really like, what do you think is best for your user? And once you've decided, I would stick to it. Like if you're like only 5 subjects per collection, stick to it. Don't let people like add more. You may want to limit who has the ability to add subjects and identify what the subjects are for that collection, for that accession record, that kind of thing. But again, I think that's a listserv question. If you're a member and have access to the listserv, you may want to ask people what their local practices are for creating subject terms, subject records, and adding them to the different record types.
That was the only one.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Rachel. Okay. Let's get into the LCNAF plugin, the only out-of-the-box plugin that comes, well, it was the only out-of-the-box plugin that came with ArchivesSpace. Now there's not necessarily plugins, but plugins that have been added and now are just a part of your ArchivesSpace instance, which is great. But if you were to go to the gear menu, you'd find this import tool. So it's click on the gear menu, go to plugins, click on LCNAF import. One of the questions I believe was about the NACO import. That I remember it being a thing, but as you can see, it is no longer a part of this. It's just LCNAF. So it's only Library of Congress, authority file, and subject headings. So this does depend on Library of Congress and other situations. So there are times when this plugin may not work. So just be aware of that. So when you're when you are importing records, you have to decide, is it an authority file, is it a name record, is it an agent, or is it a subject heading that you're importing? So we're going to import a subject heading. So essentially, when you're choosing primary name or rest of name, especially with subject heading, primary name is the first term of the subject heading. If you want subdivision, that's rest of name. So let's just say we're looking for photography. This is basically searching to begin with and then identifying what you want. As you can see, we have a lot to choose from for photography. If you are into Mark XML and all that, you can review that for the file. You can copy this and put it elsewhere if you would like, that kind of thing, especially if you want a Mark XML export. But again, it doesn't really give you that for just subject. Let's see. I don't know why there's one called photography in boring. That's cool. I'm going to import that one. And you can choose multiple to import at one time. So let's also say we want photography of plants. You can do that. If you change your mind, you can delete it from the list that you're importing. So as you're selecting, they're being put over here for you to import. And then we're going to import them. You get redirected to a background job and you wait for it to go through creation of this record or importing of these records. The more you choose, the more time it takes. So once you're done, you can look at the new record. It has the source, Library of Congress subject heading. It will give you the term as well as the type. If it had subdivisions, it would show you that as well, right? So we're going to go back in. So if you are doing Library of Congress name authority file, let's say we just want, I'm going to make this difficult myself. We want Smith. As you can see, for some reason, and I don't know why this is the case, if you choose Library of Congress name authority file as what you are pulling names from, it does not allow you to do rest of name. You can just do primary name, right? So weird to me, but that's how it is. But you can do it for subject headings. Now, Smith is, of course, our last name that we're choosing from. And that's our primary part of name. And we want Smith O'Brien, 1756 through 1811. As you can see, we're on page 1, and it's showing results 1 to 10 of 35,000. So you may want to make sure you're more specific with this Library of Congress name authority file. In 1 second. I want to make sure I'm telling you all I need to tell you in here. Yes, if you want to be more specific. So even though it doesn't give you rest of name, you can actually add to this name. So you just have to do comma. So Smith, comma, the name, right? So we search, and that way it limits your results. So if you know how the name is or how you think it appeared, you can search doing last name, first name, and that will bring up the results. So even though rest of the name doesn't appear, you can still do that. And then you should be able to select the one you want and then import it. It gives you that authority ID, right? And then we go back to a background job. Similar with subject headings, you can import more than one name authority file at a time. So you can go through and choose multiple to import. And then it will fill out the agent record, giving you record ID, right? The source, the interesting. The NACO authority file is a part of this Library of Congress. So even though we only did Library of Congress name authority, we got NACO file, right? You can see other sources like where, like important works, where this name has appeared, that kind of thing. That will go under sources, the conventions, all of that, like the different name forms. This guy has a lot of different ways of doing his name. Very cool. And if you've linked it to records or not, from here, you can go in, you can publish this if you'd like, or go ahead and link it and then publish it and go from there. But remember, you have to publish agents separately from a resource record, unlike subjects where they get published already. Any questions about the plugin?
I mean, we did have the two questions from before that I think you kind of covered. Well, there was one specific question. Is the LCNAF plugin only available for the version 4.1.1 version? No, it has been part of the application for much longer and in earlier versions.
Yeah.
But there was a question of like, is there a reason to import or is there a reason to create a name record from the Library of Congress name authorities instead of using the plugin?
So honestly, if the plugin was down, if you're not certain, it's really up to you and your use cases. Obviously, when you use the plugin, you get all that info without having to copy and paste it. And you can import more than one at a time, right? So it's really up to you and your use cases. If you are building, obviously, a subject that is not not a subject, an agent that is not in Library of Congress, of course, you're going to have to build it from scratch in the agent record. So if you can confirm that this person that you are creating a agent record for is in Library of Congress, and that's who you're wanting to refer to. As you can see, there's multiple sources for this guy, and we can confirm who he is, right? But if you can't, if it's like 20 John Smiths and you're not sure which John Smith it is, you're going to want to build out that agent record, right? So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it depends. I think there's an element of personal preference. You might not want to include all of the information, like all the different name forms. And yeah, sometimes the service goes down. I think sometimes it's easier to kind of browse and like confirm the name that you're seeing is the name that you want, but I think it's really up to the individual.
Yeah.
We have another question, says, when I try to find the plugin, I'm not seeing it. Is it possibly a permissions issue?
Yeah, different user groups, as you know, have different permissions. You can test it out in the sandbox of ArchivesSpace to see if you like it, and then talk to your system administrator about getting access to the plugin. Because again, people don't want just anyone adding agents and subject records to the instance. Especially if you have students, interns, volunteers working in there, you may not want them just importing random agents, because then you have to deal with that. and once they're found, delete them, that kind of thing. Or it's possible you could import multiple of the same.
I think those are all the questions.
Okay. Well, I think it's time to move on to classifications, because we only have one break, correct, Rachel?
Correct.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about classification. So classifications in ArchivesSpace can be used to create or edit a hierarchy of record groups, subgroups, or fonts. The majority of people who would use classifications in its traditional sense are government archives, university archives, even corporate archives to an extent, because of how the record groupings work. So it allows you to create levels between different record types or different like resource records. You can create these levels, right? And make a hierarchy. So classification defines a repository's overall arrangement scheme. They can be used to group materials for browsing in the public interface, as well as a supplement to the functionality provided by name authorities and subject terms. So using classifications, a repository can define and edit a browsing system such as a provenance-based classification scheme, so record groups, subgroups, or fonts, a scheme of meta collections, and a rudimentary function-based browsing mechanism. So I'm going to show you real quick what it looks like to see a classification in the wild. So at Georgia State, in our ArchivesSpace instance, you can see we don't have, it's called record groups in the public interface, FYI. It's not called classification because I didn't think that was user friendly. We don't have that listed as one of these, but if you were to look in one of our collection records, scroll down, we have a section for record groups. Now at Georgia State University, we have multiple collecting areas, one of them being music and pop culture. I wonder why I chose that one, being that archivist. But we collect based on these collecting areas, and we identify our collections based on these collecting areas. So when you're looking at them in our ArchivesSpace instance, you might be like, what collecting area does this belong to? Or I want to see all that's in music and pop culture, right? So when you're in a collection, you can see all of these. So we have identified it, given our identifiers for all music collections start with M. So its identifier is M. And you can see all collections attached to it. Now this is creation of a meta collection. We have our overall collecting area of music and pop culture, this ginormous collecting area that we have identified as something that we're doing. And now we've brought together all collections and records associated with that collecting area. Done the same for our Southern labor archives, women's, gender and sexuality, the list goes on. So this way, we easily for ourselves can identify them, and even on the back end can see all listings. And then when we're creating new finding aids, just go ahead and link them. So what does that mean for us? Well, I have too many tabs open. So that means that are able to create these meta collections and better know what collecting area they belong to. We do have it where they're easily identifiable by identifier, but we have thousands of collections, so we're having to like deal with that. And this is just an easier way to see that. So how do we create that, right? So when you're creating a new classification, you want to consider what are you creating it for? Is it one of these meta collections? Are you a university archivist trying to get control of your record groups and based on record retention schedules, that kind of thing? Like, what's the point, right? So we're going to create one for the university archives at John Smith University. Just use them randomly. So we're going to call it UA as the identifier. There's only two required fields when creating a classification, identifier and title. So this identifier can be unique. And then the title is just what is this? What is this referring to? That kind of thing. So the identifier and the title for all terms in the classification are both displayed in the hierarchical tree. So for example, for a term with identifier 10 and title academic computing services, the note in the tree would read 10 academic computing services. So as we have here, the identifier is listed here. And then we see the title as well. So that's where it appears when you're looking at the public side. So we're going to call this John Smith University Archive. Our repository here is for all records in this archive. So we have a mixture of university archives, a mixture of different collecting areas, just different things. And we want to make sure we have a good handle on the university archives. So you can add a description if you'd like, going over what this classification is for and why. And then you can add a creator. If this classification is created by a specific donor, you can add that here. Like if they made this meta collection or something like that, you can do that here. And then the next step is adding records. So I know that I have president's records. And I have provost records. You can browse for these, but you cannot create them. So if you want to add a resource or an accession record or a digital object, because all three can be added to a resource to a classification, you can browse, but they have to be created separately outside of creating this classification. So they already have to have been created to be able to be linked to a classification. In order to create classification records, you have to have permissions to do so. So a lot of you may not even see these as an option within your instance of ArchivesSpace. So just be aware of that. Once you are done creating this, you've linked a record. Say we don't want provost records here. You want to create more of a tree. Once you've saved it, you can start adding children to this. So similar to how when you're creating resource records, there's that hierarchy and you want to make sure you have things like series as children and then files as children of the series. So you have your parent record. The first thing you create of the classification is that parent record with any linked records like accessions, resources are linked to it. You can continue to do that, but you can also add children. This is a child of the John Smith University Archive. So if we just want to say, actually, let me leave this. If we want to actually not have any records linked here, and we want to start by just having the overall archives or overall even university, John Smith University. I'm working through this with you though. And we add a child and we're like, we need the president records. So we're just going to say PR. Because in a university setting, you can have multiple different offices, different retention schedules related to the different departments, units, colleges, right? So if we were to take the president records, we may have financial records, committee meetings, publications, whatever, and we would want to add those as records to this. So we could add a record link. And save that. You can also continue to add children to that. If you want to get even further into the hierarchy, add more children to the child you already created, similar to series and files, you can do that. If you want to put something on the same level in this hierarchy, say the provost records to us are on the same level. Well, you can create that, add a record link, add the provost records, and that is now a sibling. But again, you can add a child to that, keep going. You know that different departments function under the provost, and you want to make sure that hierarchy is noted. So here at Georgia State University, our provost is over faculty affairs, over the dean of the library, like all of that. We want to make note of that. We can do that. And you can link those records again. So even, let me cancel this. So even in these, like we have the president's office records created or added to it. If we wanted to make sure we have his the financial records of the office in there, we can do that as well. If those have been created as different accessions and resources within your instance of ArchivesSpace, because they've come in separately and you've defined them as their own collection, then you would want to link these records as part of, say, the president's overall record group, so that we know that that's where they sit within the hierarchy, right? Similar with government archives and the listing of collections in that way, like with state archives, city archives, anything like that. You can use this as a hierarchy, right? So let's see what this looks like. So we're going to save the classification. We're going to go into the public user interface, and we're going to look at record groups. So now you see here, as a part of the Allen Doe Research Center repository, we have the John Smith University record group. And within it, we have our subgroups. So we have the president's records, which within that contain the president's office records. And then we have the provost records, which within that contain the provost's office records. If we were to go back to the staff side and say that under provost, we also want to make sure we have the alumni office, because that somehow, we're just going to say that functions under there for now. You can save that. We also have, let's say, Black Student Alliance. I'm just making this up. Like what's associated with the provost is what I'm making up, just to show you how it looks. And then we can save this, go back to the public interface and look at classifications and see when we're in provost records. Well, once it finished indexing, always doing this. Yeah, once it's finished indexing, it has added all of those to this. But you also, it has taken from them the names and subjects associated with them. So in case it's a very long list of records, you can actually filter. You can choose, you only want collections about Black students, you can choose that. If you want to choose a specific names that go with it, you can do that kind of thing. So you can, there are filters that come along with even record groups when you are using them and looking through the record groups themselves. Any questions about classification?
We have 3 questions.
Yeah.
So the first is, do classifications work across repositories?
I will answer that question by going through it. So you would see that when you're under create or browse that we have classifications under the line, which tends to mean that it's an across a repository thing. We have 2 repositories to choose from. So we're gonna just see. Now we were in RC, now we're in SCA. So we're gonna browse classification. No records found. I honestly, this has happened to me with assessments as well. These are linked to records and things associated in the other repository. I'm not sure why it's under that line, but it looks like it's not a thing that functions across repository since it's very specific to the collections in the repository you're working in. They can be transferred, or no, they can't be transferred. But yeah, I'm not sure why that's the case. Have you looked and thought anything about this, Rachel?
I do not use classification, so I have not encountered this.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We have 2 repositories at Georgia State, but we haven't tried to use classifications across.
Okay, great. We have another question. We are considering using classifications for maps and photos. These formats are mixed into many different record groups. It seems like we should instead use subjects to identify format type, genre form, I believe. General thoughts about this?
You could use either if you want to. If you're using the genre format to identify them for multiple different formats, and these are linked to different record groups and collections, then yeah, create the subject record and make sure those subjects are attached to all different types of the formats, right? But again, that's one of those like meta collections you could potentially create, like have a photographs classification and have all photographic collections linked to that photograph classification. That's if it depends on how you use on the public side, right? How are you providing access to it for users? How are they finding this great listing of things, right? But if it's individual, it gets a little tricky. So it's really like, what is your institution doing right now? Another it depends type of thing, but also another great question for the listserv.
Okay, we have another. Do classifications make more sense for an institution with multiple departments and hierarchies? Would this be necessary for a community-based archive?
Mm, it is a thing that was essentially created for those who have used record groups already, use fonts and things as a record type. That's the thought behind it. But again, there is the meta collections, right, and other ways of using it. I have considered using it just in terms of different topics. Like say there's African American education collections, and you have the subject term, but there's so many collections and you want people to just be able to easily find them, you can do that. I've recommended it as a featured topics way of doing it because the public interface, if you have the ability to do so, can be customized in a way. So it doesn't have to say record groups on the public side. So this doesn't have to say record groups. I've recommended that people use classifications as a featured topics kind of thing. Just have like, these are the majority of topics that are in our collection. So if it's community archives, let's say it's on queer history and culture, and you want to make sure you're highlighting different topics there, you can use it that way, identify the topics, attach the collections, link the collections that are under that topic. So there's a way to like make it work for different archives, not just um, government and university archives that have hierarchies, because you don't have to create the hierarchy. You can just have it one level.
Okay, we have one more. If your repository has multiple collecting areas, such as university archives and special collections with various collecting areas within, for example, would you suggest using the classification similarly to how you do it at Georgia State?
Yes, I would. And I would take it a step further than what we do, and I would make sure it is a part of this these top tab menus. Um, we're still like working on our, but I say yes, but you, one, you don't have to do what I say, and two, this is all my opinion and not me sharing what should happen when you're using ArchivesSpace. I just think that it helps users. From what I found, it can help users better find materials for their research. And that's really what you're thinking about, especially on the public side, when using classifications. How will it help your users?
All right, we've gotten through all of the questions that are in the Q&A section, and I don't see any additional ones. Oh, here we got one. We use a separate repository for college record groups. Would it be better to use classifications?
It depends on how big your collections are. Like I I totally understand using a separate repository, because if that makes sense for you. But if you want more of a hierarchy structure and a better understanding of how your organization, like that organizational chart, right, how that functions, I would say use classifications, but you can still use it in that repository, right? You don't have to use just the same repository. You can create the classifications within the college archives repository. So you know the hierarchy. And when you are getting new collections, you know where it fits within the hierarchy. Yeah, it sounds like I could talk about classifications all day.
Um, any other questions? Please put them in the Q&A. We'll kind of pause a bit to give you some time. And these can be questions about classifications, but they can also be about anything we've discussed earlier.
Yeah, so classifications, subjects, agents, whatever we've talked about today. I will say that classifications is one of the underutilized aspects of ArchivesSpace, because it is one of those things that it is what you make it. So it's really up to you and your institution how you would like to use that part of ArchivesSpace, but it is there for you to figure out.
Well, maybe we will start to do our wrap up, but keep an eye also on the chat and the Q&A, so that if there are additional questions, we can answer that. Just want to remind everyone that this was being recorded and will be sent to everyone who registered afterwards, so you will have access to it. I'm going to put a link in the chat right now to an evaluation. This is also posted in your agenda. But we would really love if you could fill that out to let us know how we can improve these trainings. Um, so we encourage that. Um, I don't, Brittany, is there anything else you wanted to mention as part of sort of wrapping up?
Yeah, if you are an ArchivesSpace member, know that the help center is there for you, and you have the listserv for you to ask these questions that are more institution based and like getting case studies. And then even for those who aren't members, you have access to the sandbox, which features these resources that we've been using. And you can use that to test out any of these features that you may not have access to.
Okay, we'll do a very slow going once and so forth. So we'll kind of, here we go. I thought that might happen. Classifications do not show up under the create dropdown for me, but it does pop up under the browse dropdown. Do you know why this might be?
That is because of a permissions. So based on your group, um, what group you're in and your user access. So certain groups, say you're like a basic data entry, like how Rachel was showing earlier with light mode for agent records, you may not be able to create and update. See, that's not checked here, but you may be able to view them, right? So you can view all records in a repository, but you don't have the ability to create them. So both of those must be checked to the create must be checked in order for you to create classifications, but you probably under whatever group you're under in your repository aren't given the ability to create them. You're just able to view them. And I would ask whoever is in charge of your archive space if they would allow you to be able to create classifications just to test it out. But then again, you should be able to see in the sandbox and create in there as well.
Okay, we're gonna do a last call for questions. Okay, well, like Brittany said, there's the help center, there's the quick start guide, there's listservs. So if you think of something at a later date, you do have resources that you can turn to help you get answers to those.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for spending a few hours with us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. So thanks so much.
Yes, thank you.